Breaking news today. The Russian Survival Guide. According to the latest projections from the International Monetary Fund, Russia's economy will expand at a faster rate than those of Germany and the United Kingdom in 2018, and at a rate that is comparable to that of France and Italy. Since Vladimir Putin's regime imposed crippling international sanctions on Ukraine and Russia over a year ago, its economy is expected to compete with or even outperform 4 of the G7 countries that have been leading efforts to maintain and strengthen these sanctions. That wasn't part of the strategy at all. Putin anticipated an easy military victory last spring, but Western leaders were confident that they could defeat Russia with economic and financial weapons. This conviction was channeled by Mario Draghi, the Prime Minister of Italy, in early April 2022, when he defended sanctions on Russian energy exports by claiming that people had to choose between peace and air conditioning. To their credit, the United States and its allies didn't hold off on supplying Ukraine with weapons and other aid until they were convinced that the sanctions would actually work. But initially it was believed that impounding Russia's foreign exchange reserves held abroad, harsh restrictions on Russian banks and individuals, and cutoffs in trade in technology and raw materials would cause a collapse of the Russian economy, possibly forcing Putin to abandon his special military operation. The IMF predicted that Russia's economy would contract by 8.5% in 2022 and by 2.3% this year, less than 2 months after the invasion. However, since then, the fund has increased its GDP projection for Russia by 9.4 percentage points for both 2022 and 2023. This wasn't just bad luck with the crystal ball. It was a reflection of the West's arrogant belief in its ability to manage the global economy. The West as a whole is no longer the dominant power in the globalization era. It has taken time for most Western governments to understand that revisionist authoritarian regimes do not always prioritize economic rationality. Russia's economic elites, while appalled, have made no effort to restrain Putin from continuing his war in Ukraine despite the high human and material costs of the conflict. In reality, the oligarchs have helped Putin and his war machine, despite publicly criticizing his policies abroad. The negative loyalty that underpins the Kremlin's and oligarchs' relationship is emblematic of modern Russia and of business ties between Moscow and the West during the sanctions era. Holes in everything. Now we understand why it was unrealistic to expect the economic sanctions to have the desired effect. Companies in Western democracies have increased their imports of oil products derived from Urals crude, and emerging economies like China, India, Malaysia, and Singapore have increased their purchases of Russian oil. China is now Russia's primary trading partner, and the country is taking advantage of this position by selling semiconductors, drones, and other dual-use technologies to the Russians. Brokerage services between Western exporters and Russia have been lucrative for countries like Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, Kazakhstan, and other former Soviet republics. After falling by 43% in the first months of the war, Russian imports were largely back to pre-war levels by November 2022. Similarly, the European Union has not banned imports of key Russian products like diamonds and steel due to vested interests in a few countries. After Putin's army destroyed the Mariupol mills in Ukraine, some EU countries increased their imports of Russian semi-finished steel slabs by a factor of 2 in 2017. Some of Russia's most important financial links to the West have remained operational throughout the conflict. Despite nearly ending gas imports from Gazprom, the bank's holding company, the EU has not yet cut off Gazprombank. Gazprombank, Russia's third-largest lender, is still active in Cyprus, albeit under the watchful eye of the European Central Bank. Also, some Western companies have shown their own brand of negative loyalty to their countries ever since Russia first came under sanctions in 2014 in response to the Kremlin's illegal annexation of Crimea and support for separatists in eastern Ukraine's Donbass region. Some have found ways to continue profitable cooperation with their Russian counterparts, even supplying goods to companies that work for Russia's military-industrial complex, while others have largely adhered to the restrictions imposed by Western governments. For instance, Microsoft was hit with a $3.3 million fine last month from the U.S. Department of Commerce and the U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control. Two sanctioned Russian companies, one involved in building the Kerch Bridge connecting Russia and Crimea, and the other in producing Russian warships, signed contracts with a Microsoft subsidiary in 2016 and 2017. Danieli, an Italian manufacturer and supplier of high-precision machine tools for the steel industry, is a more recent example. After press reports revealed that one of its subsidiaries had supplied steel-making technology to the Russian conglomerate Severstal last August, Danieli announced a total withdrawal from operations in and with Russia in late April, more than 14 months into the war.